Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, stocks plunging as concerns grow over the impact of tariffs. But the White House calls it the animal spirits of the stock market. Asst has how the Trump administration is responding. Federal immigration authorities have arrested a pro-Palestinian activist and revoked his green card. President Trump responds on Truth Social. The U.S. military oil tanker and a Portuguese cargo ship carrying sodium cyanide collide off the coast of England. The collision sparked a huge fire, a dramatic rescue effort, and fears of environmental damage. Canada's Liberal Party has chosen Mark Carney to succeed Justin Trudeau as the Canadian Prime Minister. What Carney has said about Trump and tariffs. Peace talks on the war in Ukraine kick off this week as Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives in Saudi Arabia. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is also there to meet with the Crown Prince before talks with the U.S. David Lamb reports. New insights into the Menendez brothers' case as Los Angeles District Attorney Nathan Hochman speaks out. He highlights the brothers' repeated lies and questions whether they still pose a threat. Christina Kuroda with the latest.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. U.S. stocks plunged today as concerns grow over the impact of new tariffs. But the Trump administration says there's a strong divergence between the stock market and actual business confidence. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. What is the latest with market reactions and how is the White House responding?
Good evening to you, Tiff. The S&P 500 today fell by 2.7%, its largest daily drop since December. And the tech-heavy Nasdaq also fell by 4%, which is its worst day since 2022. And meanwhile, it comes as investors are still grappling with the potential impact of tariffs as well as the uncertainty that comes with it. But the White House, in response, is trying to play down market reactions by saying to us in a statement that they think there is a strong divergence between what they're seeing from the stock market, which they call the animal spirits of the stock market, between that as well as business reactions and actual responses from business leaders, which they say is actually more meaningful in protecting the economy in the medium to long term. They also gave us a list of statistics, including one showing that small business optimism has soared after Trump's election win in November to the highest level in 4 years, as well as manufacturing expanded in January for the first time in 2 years. They also cited statistics showing that the Trump administration's policies have driven in over $2 trillion in new investments. Meanwhile, President Trump himself has also previously acknowledged that there could be a little bit of disturbance coming from his tariffs policies, but this weekend he again doubled down on his take that his tariffs will bring the U.S. more wealth. Watch.
All I know is this. We're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch. We're going to have jobs. We're going to have open factories. It's going to be great.
Meanwhile, both China and Canada reacted today with new tariffs on U.S. goods. China began their new tariffs on some U.S. agricultural products, and Ontario also responded with a new surcharge of 25% on its electricity exports to the U.S. And both, of course, comes after tariffs on China, Mexico, as well as Canada went into effect last week. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for that update. Canada has elected a new prime minister. Mark Carney won the Liberal Party race to replace Justin Trudeau. Here's what we know about Canada's incoming leader.
I intend to resign.
Months after Prime Minister Trudeau announced his resignation following low approval ratings, Canada's Liberal Party has finally chosen its next leader. Former central banker Mark Carney won the Liberal Party leadership race Sunday with nearly 86% of the vote.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney.
Carney takes over as Liberal Party leader immediately, but must wait for Trudeau to step down before becoming Prime Minister for the remainder of his term. The exact date has not been announced. Carney will lead the Liberal Party into a general election later this year. In his victory speech Sunday in Ottawa, Carney focused on U.S. tariffs.
These are dark days. Dark days brought on by a country we can no longer trust.
Carney called the tariffs imposed by President Trump unjustified, saying he supports Canada's retaliatory measures.
The Canadian government has rightly retaliated and is rightly retaliating with our own tariffs that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here in Canada. And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect.
Carney also criticized rival Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, saying his plan will leave Canada divided and ready to be conquered. Poilievre has previously been compared to Trump, but has recently tried to distance himself from the U.S. president. Carney has positioned himself as a political outsider. He had never run for office before this, having previously worked as governor of the Bank of Canada and then the Bank of England. After that, he served on a number of boards in the private sector and became involved in various net zero emissions initiatives. He began informally advising Trudeau in 2020 during the COVID pandemic and became a formal advisor to the Liberal Party last year. During his campaign, Carney has said he will reduce government spending and debt. He also promised to reduce taxes for the middle class and dismantle international trade barriers. On Sunday, he repeated this promise.
My government will put into action our plan to build a stronger economy, to create new trading relationships with reliable trading partners.
He has also said he plans to expand housing by cutting red tape and funding technology to speed up completion times. He plans to take a strong emphasis on climate policies and said he values inclusiveness, criticizing what he called America's war on woke. When Canada goes to an election, Carney will face tough competition. Conservatives have criticized Carney for supporting carbon tax in the past and for overseeing Brookfield Asset Management when it moved its headquarters from Canada to the U.S. last year. Ahead of Sunday's vote, Poilievre said Carney made Canada weaker and poorer while working for Trudeau. But the prospect of a fresh start for the Liberal Party, combined with Trump's tariffs, has led to a revival of Liberal fortunes. At the start of 2025, the party trailed by 20 or more points. Now it is statistically tied with the Conservatives in several polls. Canada's next federal election must take place by October.
In related news, Ontario announcing today a 25% surcharge on electricity that it provides to Americans. Canada's most popular province says the price increase is retaliation for President Trump's tariffs. Ontario provides electricity to Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. In total, the move impacts electricity costs for 1.5 million Americans. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he would consider cutting electricity off entirely if the trade dispute escalates. Ford said Ontario's tariff would remain in place despite the one-month reprieve from Trump. Quebec is also considering similar measures with electricity exports to the U.S. Federal immigration authorities have arrested a pro-Palestinian activist. Mahmoud Khalil, a former Columbia graduate student, played a prominent role in student protests against Israel. The Trump administration has pledged to detain and deport student activists who support terrorist groups. ICE agents took Khalil into custody Saturday night. Khalil's arrest marks the first publicly known deportation effort under Trump's promised crackdown on students who joined last spring's nationwide pro-Palestinian protests. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated on X yesterday that the administration will be revoking the visas and/or green cards of Hamas supporters in America. Khalil was under investigation by Columbia University. He is accused of organizing an event in which participants glorified Hamas. And President Trump posted on Truth Social that this won't be the last case. He wrote, "This is the first arrest of many to come. We know there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it," adding that many are not students, they are paid agitators. And a federal judge has blocked Khalil's removal from the U.S. until the court orders otherwise. Judge Jesse Furman called for a conference on the case Wednesday morning. High hopes start off the week as U.S. and Ukrainian officials are scheduled to meet in Saudi Arabia. They're planning discussions on a deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war. NTD's David Lamb reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia on Monday as part of a 3-day trip to speak with Ukrainian counterparts. He plans to advance President Trump's goal to end the Russia-Ukraine war.
We're hopeful we'll have good meetings tomorrow. I mean, the minerals deal's on the table. That's continuing to be worked on. It's not part of this conversation per se, and it's not something that tomorrow can be successful without it. It's certainly a deal the president wants to see done, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen tomorrow.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also arrived on Monday, expecting to meet with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saudi, whose country has played mediating roles since the war started in 2022. Ahead of Tuesday's meeting, Rubio said that the minerals deal is important, but it's not the main agenda topic, and that more details need to be worked out on. But the main goal of the meeting is to see what kind of concessions Ukraine is willing to make. According to State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce, Rubio will also meet with the Crown Prince to discuss ways to advance shared interests in the region and strengthen the U.S.-Saudi relationship. After talks broke down during Zelenskyy's visit to the White House in February, Trump froze military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine.
It'd be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said it a lot of times.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements.
In the days after, Zelenskyy said he regretted how the meeting went and was willing to renegotiate over a rare earth minerals deal in exchange for continued U.S. military aid. After Saudi Arabia, Rubio will travel to Canada for the G7 foreign ministers meeting to advance President Trump's America First policy agenda. David Lamb, NTD News, back to you.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio provided an update today on USAID. Rubio wrote on X that the 6-week review process has concluded and that 83% of the agency's programs will be canceled. The Secretary of State said the 5,200 contracts canceled spent tens of billions of dollars in ways that did not serve America's core national interests. Rubio says in some cases they harmed U.S. interests. The remaining approximately 1,000 programs will now be administered under the State Department. Rubio thanked DOGE and hardworking staff for achieving what he called overdue and historic reform. DOGE member Elon Musk commented on Rubio's post, writing, "Tough, but necessary. Good working with you." A major rescue operation today off the eastern coast of England. A U.S.-owned oil tanker and a Portuguese cargo ship collided, setting both vessels on fire. The cargo ship was carrying containers of cyanide. U.S. officials have confirmed the oil tanker was carrying jet fuel for the U.S. Department of Defense. The collision set both vessels on fire, causing multiple explosions and forcing both crews to abandon ship. Over 30 people were rescued and one person is in the hospital. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's office said details of the collision and its cause are, quote, still becoming clear. Coming up, lawmakers have not reached an agreement on government funding with just 4 days left before a government shutdown. Luis Martinez brings us the latest from Capitol Hill. The Trump administration is rolling out a new app that allows illegal immigrants to self-deport instead of facing possible detention. What Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said about the app and its goal. And Mayor Eric Adams announces the removal of over 1,000 illegal firearms from New York City's streets since the start of the year, with shooting incidents in January and February at a record low. Chris Spears reports from the Big Apple when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Lawmakers debate the merits of a stopgap bill to avoid a government shutdown. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Martinez, has the latest on the government funding battle on Capitol Hill.
We're not seeing a clean CR. We're going to see a CR where you see defense spending augmented, but also allowing for new contracts and new starts. But we can't do a year-long clean CR and say that we're deterring China and Russia. It would be a lie.
The Republican proposal to avert a government shutdown increases defense spending by $6 billion and cuts down $13 billion on non-defense spending.
Let me be clear. This is a continuing resolution, which means that we're basically extending the funding that everyone voted for back in December. So there's no reason why the Democrats should not join us and make this bipartisan. There's no additional partisan policy that has been put in this bill. As a matter of fact, there's only positive increases in spending.
House Republican leadership argues that their proposal contains no poison pills, but at least one House Republican lawmaker, Congressman Thomas Massie, has already signaled he will not support a continuing resolution, while House Democratic leadership has accused Republicans of cutting them out of the process altogether.
And what we've seen with Speaker Johnson is that he walked away from the bipartisan talks. We have talks ongoing right now. And what I support is an effort that's the same thing that the Republican chair of Appropriations, Cole, supports, which he says that a bipartisan deal would be better than a CR.
Leader Hakeem Jeffries is very clear that we cannot support a continued resolution when Republicans who control the House and the Senate have not made any effort to negotiate with us on what the CR would look like.
Republicans can only afford to lose 2 votes on the House floor, and it remains to be seen if any Democrats break party lines and join Republicans to vote for the continuing resolution.
A continuing resolution that the Republican majority is proposing doesn't do anything to address the concerns I'm hearing from my constituents here in Oregon. It seems to double down on the dangerous cuts, including to Medicaid, does nothing to protect Medicare and Social Security.
It's important to note that Monday afternoon, the Senate voted to confirm Lori Chavez-DeRemer to become the next Labor Secretary. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The Trump administration rolled out a new app today. It will allow illegal immigrants in the U.S. to, quote, self-deport rather than face possible arrest and detention. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection app is known as CBP Home. It will offer an option for someone to signal their intent to depart. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said the app gives illegal immigrants the option to leave now, so they may still have the opportunity to return legally in the future and live the American dream. CBP Home replaces an app known as CBP One that was launched under Biden. The Biden-era app included a feature that allowed some 1 million migrants in Mexico to schedule an appointment before they request entry at a legal border crossing. Trump shut down CBP One hours after taking office. A Trump administration regulation is set to take effect April 11th. It would require people lacking legal status to register with the federal government or face fines or jail time. Today marks the 50th day since President Trump started his second term. Do everyday Americans approve of his achievements so far? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Today marks the 50th day since President Trump took office for the second time. So how would you rate his performance so far?
Less than stellar. I think he's done some of the things he promised to do. I don't agree with all of those promises.
Absolutely perfect. Better than we thought.
The best thing that Trump ever did was ban paper straws.
Oh, we agree.
They just don't work.
He's fulfilling his campaign promises, for better or for worse. We think for better, in our opinion, but I'm happy to have him as our president.
He has accomplished what his voters asked for. He's accomplished what they asked for. He was very honest about who he is and what he intended to do, and he stuck to that.
I'd say on a 1 to 5 basis, 5 being the best, I'd say a 3. I'm just a little disappointed that he just does it the way he does. I mean, I knew it was coming. He's doing it, and unfortunately, it's really not what I think the entire country believes.
You were talking about the budget cut or something, or?
No, just a deeper idea of what the president should be like, act like.
So far, I think he's doing a wonderful job. Getting rid of all the corruption. Hopefully I was there before, and cutting back, and hopefully we can live prosperously again very soon.
Overall, would you say that President Trump has your approval?
I don't think my approval matters to him. I don't think anyone's approval matters to him but his own.
My approval? Let's just say I'll wait and see.
No, I think he's more worried about people with money keeping their money and less about the people that don't have money getting the assistance they need or keeping the money that they need as well.
We got to cut this deficit down so much, trillions of dollars in debt, and every little bit helps, and no one seemed to do it before, and here we are, cutting deficit, making America great again. Just all the money he's saving us, it's fantastic. I tell you, Doge, man, Doge, bringing Elon in, love it.
I think he's trying to protect our country, both from the border perspective, from the military perspective, and economic perspective. I think he's a strong leader through the whole world, and I think people see him as a strong leader in the world, which makes me proud to be an American.
Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman provided an update this morning on the high-profile Menendez brothers murder case. He discussed the lies the brothers have told and questioned whether or not they pose a danger to society. NTD's Christina Corona has the details.
LA District Attorney Nathan Hochman announced at a press conference Monday that he wants to withdraw the previous DA's motion for a resentencing hearing of Eric and Lyle Menendez. He says the brothers haven't fully admitted their motive or shown enough self-reflection.
The update covered 3 elements: the habeas petition filed by the Menendez brothers, their clemency plea to the California governor, and their resentencing request.
One of the key hallmarks of resentencing is, do the defendants pose an unreasonable risk of danger to the community? One way to decide if they pose that risk is to understand if they have been rehabilitated. And one way to understand if they've been rehabilitated is, have they accepted and exhibited full insight into the crimes that they have committed and accepted complete responsibility for their criminal actions.
Hochman is standing firm on the Menendez brothers' case. Hochman has already asked the courts to deny the brothers' habeas petition, but Governor Gavin Newsom has directed the California Board of Parole hearings to review whether the brothers pose a risk to public safety if released. Last month, Hochman dismissed new evidence, a letter Eric Menendez allegedly wrote to his cousin detailing abuse by their father, calling it not credible and questioning why it wasn't presented during the brothers' double homicide trial. Hochman opposes a new trial but supports a resentencing hearing as long as it's on his terms. He's requesting that a resentencing motion filed by the previous district attorney, George Gascon, be withdrawn before the case moves forward. The DA also accused them of fabricating their self-defense claim and lying for the past 30 years.
Eric and Lyle lied on the 911 call about just discovering their parents' bodies. The second lie that they've admitted to is that they lied to the police, family, and friends and the media about their involvement in the murders. They admitted that they lied to the police, family, and friends, suggesting the mafia was involved in the murders.
Around 24 relatives, including Joan Anderson Vandermolen, 92, the mother of one of the murder victims, have come out in support of the brothers' release.
If they go ahead and finally come clean with the court, with the public, with the DA's office, with their own family members, and acknowledge all these lies, and then can be said to have fully and completely accepted responsibility for their actions, in the future, the court can weigh these new insights into making a determination as to whether they now qualify for rehabilitation and resentencing.
A resentencing hearing is set for March 20th and 21st for the brothers, who are serving life without the possibility of parole. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams today announcing that more illegal guns have been seized. His office also reports the lowest number of shootings for January and February in the city's history. NTD's Chris Spears reports from the Big Apple.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams says that the NYPD has seized over 1,000 illegal firearms since the start of this year, over 20,000 since the start of his administration. And he's saying that it's possible every single one of the guns behind me represents a life saved.
We have drove year-to-date shootings down to a record low in our city's history, saving countless lives and keeping New York City safe. We are the safest big city in America. And I remember at the beginning of my time as mayor, sitting in the hospital room with a mother and an 11-month-old baby, that was shot in the head. And the mother was so strong and proud and really energized us to know that we had a mission in front of us, and we put plans in place to address this issue. And we know that we can bring down violence because we have done it over and over again.
Also at this press conference was an activist named Jackie Rowe Adams, who lost 2 of her sons to gun-related street violence a few decades ago.
See, I can't bring back my 2 kids, but I could certainly help another mother, another family from feeling the pain and hurt that I'm feeling. So that's why I'm here today, to support the efforts of public safety.
NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch had some encouraging news about reduced crime levels in New York City.
Their shootings have now reached their lowest levels in recorded history. And across the city, we continue to break records, and the results are quite clear. January and February combined saw the fewest shootings for the first 2 months of a year in recorded history.
She detailed an arrest of 8 gang members in January in New York City. She said all of them were in the New York City gang database and took that as an opportunity to mention that some people on the New York City Council actually want to get rid of the New York City gang database. Mayor Adams mentioned the issue of recidivism, which is basically when somebody commits a crime, goes to jail, gets out of jail, commits another crime, goes back into jail, sometimes multiple times. And he said that each of the guns on the table surrounding him at the conference today could have been from people with a recidivist history. Chris Beers, NTD News.
Coming up, thousands of accounts promoting a hit piece on Shen performing arts have been suspended on X. We break down the Epoch Times expose of accounts pushing Chinese Communist Party propaganda and hear from an investigative reporter after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Social media platform X has removed thousands of accounts linked to the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. Those accounts were amplifying New York Times articles targeting Xinjiang Performing Arts, a company founded by members of the spiritual practice Falun Gong. Why were these accounts doing this, and how many are gone now? Our data reporter Kevin Hogan has more on this.
These are thousands of fake accounts that were removed by X because they were inactive and they were just doing things just to promote a CCP, Chinese Communist Party propaganda line, and that was that New York Times hit piece on the performing arts company Shen. Again, these are bots, so it could just be like AI maybe, or they're operatives, even part of the PLA, the Chinese People's Liberation Army, just getting in there and boosting these things to advance their own interests, or even just trolls online, all regurgitating this. Look at, these are the accounts. You see these pictures, they almost look like bots. They don't even have real faces. A lot of them have these names that are just some word with a couple numbers afterwards. So just generic, arbitrary names. Again, a lot of them don't have any followers either. So they're just made for one purpose and one purpose alone, just to push this propaganda. Because again, the New York Times was putting out several hit pieces, and that's 10 hit pieces on Shen Yun, this dance company. A lot of them are Falun Gong practitioners. It's a spiritual movement that's persecuted in China, and they shed light on the horrible human rights abuses that the CCP is committing against these people. So of course the Chinese Communist Party does not want anyone to go see that show. But I mean, that's in a short time frame, 10 attack pieces in just 8 months. So at this rate, we're going to look further into the Epoch Times expose into this to try to understand what exactly is going on. I mean, one Chinese language hit piece got 37,000 shares, over 37,000 shares. Again, that's bots doing this, these CCP operatives getting in there. The problem is that makes the post go viral. It even pushes it to the top of these aggregators. They see, wow, it got that many shares, must be an important story. So it goes to the top of the charts, and people pick up on that when normally they wouldn't, because it's not actually really that popular, right? So we're going to break down the numbers even further. This is the traction that the Chinese language of the New York Times normally gets. So for this hit piece on Facebook, they got a couple hundred comments, right? But on average, all of their engagements, whether it's likes, shares, and stuff, that only amounts to about 60 for one of their posts. But look, the likes and share, the likes, just bumps that up to almost 2,000 on Facebook alone. Now the shares, there's the big story. On X, you see that 37,000 shares, right? That dwarfs the average completely. You almost can't even see it anymore at this scale. So that is just more evidence that this post is just being artificially propped up by all these bots and trolls and other types of accounts that are made just to further that CCP propaganda line, right? And here's more evidence. Look, there are unusually low follower counts among these people, these bots or other operatives, that are spreading these hit pieces. So for example, just take a normal sharing. Most of the time, it's, you have about 90% of the people who share an article have about 50 or more followers. Think, if you just made an account, you might get a couple followers, you're a real person, you're sharing something, and then only about 10% have less than 50 followers. But for the hit pieces, it's the exact opposite. Look at this. You have 80%, a huge portion of them, don't have any followers at all. And then another 14% with 1 to 50 followers. So a bulk of, almost 90%, over 90%, you're looking at, just people who are not real people, or they're in there for a deceptive purpose. Just try to artificially inflate these numbers. Again, this is an Epoch Times review, their analysis of data provided by BuzzSumo. They do analytics for social media sites. So furthermore, the X just got in there and said, no, we're going to shut these down after the Epoch Times informed them. And so these accounts with 1 or 0 followers, they shut down most of them. That's 96% of them. And then the Epoch Times found, they did a sample of about 100 of these accounts that actually did have some amount of followers, right? More than just 1 or 0. And they told the X about it, and X said, okay, well, they went in and they suspended 75% of those other accounts that do have followers. So they were even able to get in there and work on tracking down these accounts that are just up to no good, that have no real business being on X in the first place, right? So even the ones that do have followers, we're talking 10,000 followers or more, these accounts that shared that main hit piece in the Chinese language, half of them show inauthentic activity. So this could just be a repurposed account. The CCP operatives just go in, they say, oh, this was a business account of some form, had some followers, great. We'll convert it over to our propaganda machine and have them start retweeting or reposting these hit pieces so that it can gain more traction at the same time. So again, you have to think that traction that could gain more visibility if a post is reposted so many times, causing people to come across something that basically has no merit to it whatsoever. Back to you.
Experts now highlight the growth of the CCP's online influence operations, including the use of AI to create fake accounts and amplify anti-Falun Gong propaganda. As Kevin mentioned, one Chinese language article about Shen was shared over 37,000 times, but 80% of the accounts that reposted the article have no followers. NTD's Fiona G asked Joshua Phillip, senior investigative reporter with the Epoch Times and host of Crossroads on Epoch TV, about those numbers and what the Epoch Times has uncovered in its investigation.
Well, that was what raised the flag for the Epoch Times in the first place. Of course, Epoch Times launched an investigation into it, and we're like, something doesn't line up here. We were looking, of course, at the different accounts that were promoting these, what are obviously anti-Falun Gong hit pieces from the New York Times, which fully aligns with CCP propaganda. And so it's interesting, suddenly what looked like CCP propaganda accounts are what are spreading it. Sure enough, we look into it. Of course, Epoch Times did the investigation. My colleague Peter Svaab, he did the article on it. Epoch Times looks into it, and sure enough, it looks like the accounts are fake. They report it to Twitter, or X as it's called now, and X confirms it. X ends up deleting massive amounts, just thousands upon thousands of them. And so we can say, affirmatively now, fake CCP-tied accounts, it looks like CCP-tied, fake accounts were promoting the New York Times and doing anti-Falun Gong hit pieces.
And what a headline that is.
Yeah.
But my question here is, why specifically target Falun Gong or Shen Performing Arts, which is a company founded by Falun Gong practitioners?
Yeah, well, why persecute a religion that talks about truthfulness and kindness? You're dealing with communism, that's why. The Chinese Communist Party is set out to persecute a group basically for no reason. And in order to justify a persecution that had no reason, what the CCP had to do is they had to make stuff up. They had to fabricate reasons. And so what the CCP has been doing for the past, since 1999, is fabricating incidents, fabricating news, fabricating, fake hit pieces, and trying to spread these globally. Now, you'd think that a decent news outlet would actually look into the validity of the allegations or lack thereof. There have been some that have done a great job exposing it. In the UK, for example, they had a tribunal, government tribunal. They actually investigated the persecution of Falun Gong. They found that the Chinese Communist Party is, in fact, harvesting the organs from living Falun Gong practitioners, massive persecution. They even determined in this tribunal that even groups outside of the CCP, investors, businesses, everything tied in with this, that they could face criminal charges one day. The New York Times is silent on it. Not only that, during that tribunal, a former journalist with New York Times came out and she said New York Times canceled an article she had investigating this. And so it raises some real questions. Well, why is the New York Times seemingly not only covering this up, canceling pieces that would have exposed things that are confirmed to be true regarding the persecution, but are instead even working, it seems, with CCP, hit pieces and fake news and fake bots promoting the CCP's propaganda, targeting a group right here in the U.S.
And I think that raises another concern that is so important to Western democracy, which is journalistic integrity.
Yeah, what a concept, right? Well, I've said this repeatedly, actually. The free societies, you need to have an informed public to have a free society. Because what is the basis of a free society? It's you and I going to the polls and casting our votes. What is the decision based upon when we go and cast our votes? Well, it's public information. And so if you want to change a country, you change the information. This is why you have groups like the CCP trying to control information. This is why you have groups trying to censor everything they don't like. This is why you have massive information campaigns like we're watching right now. Tied in with this whole New York Times hit piece thing, we're finding out the CCP has a campaign on this. They have under their military, officially adopted in their military code, called the 3 warfares. Psychological warfare, which is the war for narrative, media warfare, which is the control of outlets of information, and legal warfare, the triggering of legal investigations and cases, which they can do either by fabricating charges or fabricating information to instigate that, or by having people they've paid off instigate it for them. And the CCP is doing this right now, targeting Shen, targeting Falun Gong, and because they're the CCP, targeting just about everybody else who's critical of the Chinese Communist Party right now, which is, in my opinion, deeply stupid. But this is the CCP we're talking about.
Josh, building off of that, those points you mentioned there, they come from an Epoch Times report that Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese regime, launched this tactic, this strategy to persecute really Falun Gong overseas, to extend past international borders, and it was implemented back in 2022. And I think the fact that they're using Western media, social media, all of these tactics, it's not just an attack on one religious group or on one American company, but it's really an attack on Western values.
Well, it's even more than that. What the Chinese Communist Party is doing right now is it's mobilizing all the systems that it normally keeps hidden. Now, from one perspective, you could say, geez, it's horrible they're attacking Shen and Falun Gong and innocent religious believers in the United States. It's terrible, and frankly, I hope the U.S. government wakes up to that and does something about it, which I think they are. They are charging some Chinese spies. In fact, they've even charged several tied in with these attacks, including against Shen, including recently against Epoch Times. They just indicted 12 Chinese hackers who were targeting the Epoch Times. But on the other side, you could say it's a great opportunity for the U.S. because as the CCP is basically exposing all of its cards right now, they can take action to go after these systems. So I think it's a big opportunity if they choose to do it. But if they don't do it, who's to say the CCP won't just use this to target someone else? They're demonstrating a capability right now to export persecution, right? Transnational repression. And they tried doing this before. In fact, my career as a journalist started last time they tried doing it. Well, maybe not last time, but one of the previous times, because there have been many. Back in 2008, we found out the CCP was launching a program where they were trying to export basically just physical violence. They were using Chinese mafia, they were using front organizations, they call them tongs, and they were making them physically beat up Chinese dissidents. For example, this was ahead of the Beijing Olympics 2008 at this time. They were beating up, for example, Falun Gong practitioners on the streets of New York. We have video of it. They were doing this in France. They were doing it in, basically across the U.S. They were doing it in San Francisco. And they were also having Chinese police dress up like Tibetan Buddhist monks, and then they were trying to frame them using the same things. They had Chinese student groups going out launching protests. They were mobilizing things just like this, only at that time they were doing it through physical violence. This time they're doing it through information.
And it seems that they're getting more brazen about it. It seems that it's escalating, would you say?
It is. And on your point too, actually, it's not even just the Epoch Times saying that Xi Jinping launched his campaign. That was recently confirmed by The Diplomat. They did a follow-up article. They corroborated the claims of the Epoch Times. Xi Jinping has, in fact, basically initiated a new transnational repression right now, targeting Falun Gong in the United States and around the world.
Absolutely shocking. What else has this latest report from Epoch Times uncovered that you found to be particularly hard to believe?
I don't find anything hard to believe, but to me, this is the tip of the iceberg still. I think that what we're finding right now is a small piece of the greater picture because, myself as a journalist, I've been studying this stuff for almost 20 years now. Like, this has been my career. And I know based on my investigations, look, we hear about Chinese secret police stations. We hear about, Chinese hacker arrested, or this individual was stealing information for China. Kash Patel, FBI, they just arrested 3 guys, two active military in the U.S. Army, 1 former, who were stealing information on the U.S. military, giving it to China. They're facing treason charges right now. So you hear about some cases like this, 1 guy arrested, 2 guys arrested, and so on. I've heard estimates that the number of Chinese spies the CCP has in the United States is closer to 1 million.
Unbelievable.
So what they're doing is fantastic. It needs to become a much bigger focus. In my opinion, this actually represents the greatest threat to the United States. It is the active measures of the Chinese Communist Party working very hard within the United States to destroy this country. And you could say, well, this is just a religious group maybe Americans have never heard about or don't know much about, fighting with the CCP. No, that's not the case. They're the ones they're going after right now, and if they're allowed to, win, basically, if they're allowed to do it, someone else is going to be next. And the CCP has already demonstrated, alongside Falun Gong, they're even attacking, even threatening U.S. elected officials right now. If there are members of Congress who are defending Falun Gong or defending Shen, the CCP is threatening them. How are these people not going to jail for that? How can you threaten an elected official working for a foreign government and nobody does anything about it? This is where we're at.
Joshua, Philip, keep up the good work. Thanks for coming on today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Outages on X, the social media platform, went down multiple times today. Owner Elon Musk is blaming this on a massive cyber attack. In an interview with Fox Business this afternoon, Musk said the attack came from IP addresses originating in the Ukraine area. On X, Musk said the company is attacked every day, but this one was done with a lot of resources. He said he expects it was either a large coordinated group or a country was involved. News outlets following Down Detector found thousands of outages reported this morning. Users submitted data shows earlier in the day there were as many as 40,000 impacted. Coming up in hockey, Alex Ovechkin's goal yesterday moves him to within 9 of Wayne Gretzky's all-time mark. NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a busy day in sports, especially in the NFL, as today is the first day teams can negotiate with free agents. Now, one of the biggest reported signings was quarterback Darnold to Seattle.
Yeah, Darnold's deal was reported 3 years for $100 million. Now, he would replace Geno Smith, who was reportedly traded to Las Vegas just last week. Now, I don't know who Darnold's actually going to throw to because the Seattle Seahawks actually reportedly dealt their top receiver, that's DK Metcalf, to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second-round pick. The other one, Tyler Lockett, will reportedly be released, so a lot going on. Now, all of these moves here are reported, unconfirmed, because teams cannot actually sign anyone until Wednesday, but they can negotiate. Now, elsewhere, the Jets signing quarterback Justin Fields, formerly of the Steelers. The Steelers, meanwhile, are reportedly discussing signing quarterback Aaron Rodgers, formerly of the Jets. He has not actually been officially released yet, so we're not sure on that one. Big news also out of DC, the Commanders are reportedly trading a number of draft picks to Houston for offensive tackle Laramie Tunsil. So a lot's going on in the NFL right now. It's probably going to continue this week.
Well, moving to hockey news, Alex Ovechkin scored again last night, giving him 186 in his career and moving him closer to Wayne Gretzky's record. Will he pass him before the season ends?
Yeah, very likely. Washington's got 18 games left. He's 8 from tying him, 9 from passing him, so it's like 1 every 2 games. So over this year, he's got 33 goals in 48 games, so it's like 2 every 3 games. So he's definitely on pace to pass him, probably in early April. Now, last night's goal was an empty netter. It actually moves him up to 4th in the league in scoring just this year with 33 goals, which is incredible considering he's missed 16 games already due to injuries. Even more amazing considering he's 39 years old. Now, just for a comparison's sake, Gretzky's final season, he was 38 years old. He scored just 9 goals the entire season. So it's pretty amazing really what Ovechkin's doing right now.
Looking at NBA news, Golden State Warriors star Steph Curry is becoming the assistant general manager at his alma mater, Davidson, for the basketball programs. What does this role entail?
Well, officially, he'll provide guidance and advice to college athletes there. So it's kind of a broad term. The whole general manager position is a new one to college sports now that name, image, likeness payments are available. And it's looking like schools will soon be able actually to pay their players. Now, before this, you simply got a scholarship. Now that there's big money involved, it really makes sense to have a person in charge of the financial aspect like you would a professional sports team. I think just Curry's presence there is definitely going to help recruiting. I mean, he's maybe the most famous player in the NBA. He's certainly the school's most famous alum. He became a household name all the way back in 2008 when he nearly led this tiny school all the way to the Final Four. They fell a win short. A year later, he was a first-round pick in the NBA where he's won 4 NBA titles and 2 MVPs. So a very good choice, I think, for Curry there.
Well, shifting to college basketball, Duke moved up to #1 in the rankings today, a day after the end of the regular season. What's in store this week for college basketball?
Yeah, this is conference championship week for most of the major conferences. There'll be 31 conference championships. The winners of each get an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. Now, 5 teams have already won there, so they've already punched their tickets there. Now, for some of these lesser-known conferences, this is a very big deal because otherwise they might have trouble making it as an at-large bid. Now, for others like SEC schools and Big Ten schools, they'll have a number of teams getting in no matter how they fare here. Now, by Sunday, we'll have all the conference championships wrapped up, and then the NCAA Tournament Committee will reveal which teams make the NCAA Tournament. The brackets, they call them, and then March Madness officially begins.
Well, a lot to watch out for. Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.